Friends, welcome to Gospel Culture, Kingdom, an audio magazine connecting churches in China with churches around the world.
Together, we explore how the gospel transforms nations, how Christian faith shapes culture, and how the church embodies God's kingdom across different social contexts.
2 decades in transition. The story of an overseas returnee church in urban China. Written by Minister Xu Wen. Established in 2004, X Church in S City is a Chinese urban house church that evolved from a fellowship of overseas returnees. As an evangelical church unaffiliated with any denomination, X Church's birth and growth are deeply rooted in the currents of the times and China's social transformations at the dawn of the 21st century. As a house church, it naturally inherits the profound historical traditions of the Chinese church. This article systematically traces X Church's development over the past 21 years, explores the origins of its spiritual heritage, and presents the distinctive characteristics shaped by its specific historical context.
Part 1. Initiation and Establishment, 2004 to 2010. Historical context. The founding of X Church is inextricably linked to the returnee wave phenomena the early 21st century, a trend stemming from China's reform and opening up policy since 1978. Deng Xiaoping's reforms not only transformed China's economic structure but also profoundly impacted the flow of talent and cultural exchange. Regarding study abroad policies, the government further proposed the guiding principle: supporting overseas study, encouraging return, and ensuring freedom of movement in 1993, laying the institutional foundation for Chinese students to pursue advanced studies abroad and return upon completion. Following China's sustained rapid economic growth and its entry into the World Trade Organization in 2001, the nation began actively attracting top overseas talent to return and contribute to national development. According to the China Returnees Development Report, the number of students returning from overseas was only 20,200 in 2003, but it rapidly increased to 108,300 by 2009 and reached 272,900 in 2012. A significant portion of this group had been exposed to and embraced the Christian faith while abroad. During the same period, China's religious policies experienced a degree of liberalization. Under Jiang Zemin's administration, the government acknowledged religion's positive social role and viewed it as potentially beneficial to socialist economic development. This policy orientation prompted many overseas Christians to return as professionals. They established fellowships and churches in major cities, including the H Fellowship, which was instrumental in the founding of X Church.
Origins. In early 2000, the founders of X Church, Mr. and Mrs. L, arrived in City S. They had studied in the United States during the 1990s, where they accepted Christ and were discipled in local Chinese churches. Like many returnees of that era, they had obtained U.S. citizenship and held advanced degrees and professional expertise. Upon returning to China, they joined the H Fellowship. On a Sunday in February 2004, Reverend Edwin Su, General Director of Overseas Campus Ministries, delivered a sermon at the H Fellowship. After the service, Reverend Su had lunch with over a dozen returnee believers. During the meal, he shared his vision and encouraged them to establish their own small groups to welcome the growing number of returning Christian professionals. This proposal received an enthusiastic response. These young believers opened their homes, forming multiple small groups across different residential areas. Among these, the L Couples group merged with 3 others to form a new fellowship, marking the embryonic form of X Church.
Early growth and model of gatherings. From 2006 to 2008, as the number of returnees grew, the believers at X Church enthusiastically shared the gospel, leading many to Christ. The church expanded to 6 small groups, with its membership growing from solely returnees to include urban white-collar workers and individuals of different ages. Most groups gathered at a host family's home on Saturday afternoons or Sundays, with attendance ranging from 10 to 20 people. A typical Sunday for single believers might look like this: breakfast of steamed pork buns, morning worship or Bible study, lunch of sausage and rice dishes, all prepared by the host family, followed by afternoon sharing or sports activities, and finally, dinner together before reluctantly saying goodbye. This group format not only fulfilled some church functions but also fostered a strong sense of belonging among participants, a model closely resembling the faith experiences most returnees had overseas. Consequently, many returnee believers who came to X Church chose to commit to this community long-term. From 2007 to 2010, thanks to a small wave of returnees after 2008, X Church expanded to 12 groups. Core leaders formed a resource team that provided Bible study materials to all groups while taking turns leading Sunday worship and administering communion. Overseas Campus Ministries simultaneously offered believers 3 years of discipleship through its Three Companions model. In 2010, disagreements over future direction led to divisions within the core team. The founding couple L invited an experienced pastor to help discern the path forward and ultimately decided to transition to a congregational model. Thus, X Church completed its transformation from a homogeneous overseas returnee fellowship into a diverse urban fellowship. During this phase, X Church's core mission was to become a spiritual home for returning overseas Christians, helping them live out their faith through home group Bible studies, fellowship, and gospel outreach.
Part 2. From Small Group Church to Local Congregation, 2011 to 2017. Historical Context and Challenges. From 2010 to 2017, Chinese society exhibited a tightening trend across various levels, with a growing tendency toward authoritarian centralization. Although waves of overseas study and returnees persisted, now featuring younger students, many early 2000s returnees with foreign passports began leaving China due to tightening ideological and economic policies. Meanwhile, after the 2010 Lausanne Congress in Cape Town, substantial resources flowed into China's urban churches through various channels, supporting these emerging congregations in their institutional development and growth. During this period, urban churches faced varying degrees of persecution, yet under God's protection, X Church secured some transformative space.
The transition to congregational model. At this critical juncture, God brought Pastor C and his wife to X Church. With extensive professional, pastoral, and life experiences in North American Chinese churches, they began serving at the 10th Church in 2008. Under Pastor C and the leadership team, the church leased an office space in March 2012 and resumed Sunday worship services. Thankfully, despite external pressures, the church's Sunday worship has continued uninterrupted to this day. Pastor C and his wife restructured the core leadership team, increasing the proportion of local co-workers to over half. Together with the founding couple L, they announced a gradual withdrawal from leadership in order to focus on training local leaders. Influenced by Pastor Rick Warren of Saddleback Church, Pastor C pioneered an adult Sunday school program using a base running concept to provide systematic training. This served dual purposes, fostering a shared language among coworkers from diverse backgrounds to promote unity, and equipping them with a comprehensive biblical knowledge to prepare for potential church planting. Whether driven by external pressures or internal growth, members embraced the program with great enthusiasm. After Sunday worship services, most stayed to attend adult Sunday school. "What base are you on?" became a common greeting at church. During this period, the church clarified its vision and mission, establishing a Sunday ministry that included worship services, a choir, and Sunday schools for adults and children. Small groups continued their roles in organizing Bible study, gospel outreach, welcoming newcomers, and caring for members, while deepening connections through joint events like youth camps, Christmas evangelistic meetings, and short-term missions. During the transition to a formal church, X Church also began connecting with local house churches and Christian organizations, supporting both local and overseas missions. The congregation, predominantly young and vibrant, was passionate about gospel outreach. Each October, after youth camp, preparations began for the Christmas evangelistic event. Designing themes, writing scripts, crafting costumes, rehearsing, and praying. For 2 consecutive years, the church rented a large theater to host evangelistic nights, attracting over 400 attendees. In 2015, the L couple stepped down as planned. Shortly after, the C couple was summoned by authorities and ordered to stop their involvement in local church activities. Simultaneously, the church venue was raided by the police. Confronting these internal and external challenges, 8 local core leaders stepped up, seeking a new venue, hiring a full-time pastor, and shouldering responsibilities at every level. In 2016, the church hired its first full-time minister, Minister A, who returned after theological training in the United States. The church continued its various ministries and introduced external resources for leadership training, including theological education, biblical counseling, marriage seminars, and ministries to mothers. Under Minister A's leadership, the team established shared governance, formalized systems, and drafted the Confession of Faith and Church Constitution.
Evaluation of the transition. Between 2011 and 2017, X-Church successfully transitioned from a fellowship to a formal congregation and completed the shift from missionary leadership to local leadership. While continuing to welcome returnees, the church saw a steady increase of believers without overseas background. X-Church has become a significant member among emerging urban churches. As a missionary, Pastor C brought experiences and resources from North American Chinese churches, enabling X-Church to develop characteristics distinct from local churches. X-Church maintains a conservative stance on fundamental beliefs while adopting an open approach to governance, including supporting women in teaching ministries. In pastoral counseling, X-Church was among the first to address depression from psychological and neuroscientific perspectives and introduced family and marriage counseling resources early on. During this period, many individuals with depression or even schizophrenia, often labeled as possessed by demons or unspiritual by traditional house churches, came to X-Church after hearing relevant lectures. The church also welcomed several men with same-sex attractions, accompanying them in their faith journey and encouraging them to hold fast to their faith. X-Church was actively involved in workplace, student and charity ministries, and mobilized members to participate in cross-cultural short-term missions. By this point, X-Church's fundamental structure and culture had taken shape.
Part 3. Challenges and Turning Points, 2018 to 2024. Historical Context and Turning Points. The year 2018 marked a pivotal turning point for both Chinese society and church. The newly revised regulations on religious affairs took effect on February 1, 2018, signaling a new wave of crackdowns on house churches. During this phase, X-Church endured multiple external pressures and navigated the COVID-19 pandemic with all its challenges. Nevertheless, these external pressures deepened X-Church's identity as a house church, while internal leadership crises prompted a re-examination of its governance and operations.
3 external shocks and responses. The first shock occurred in May 2019 when Minister A was summoned for questioning by state security authorities and subsequently quit his ministry at the church. The second shock occurred in 2021. After the COVID-19 outbreak in late 2019, the church began online Sunday worship services in early 2020, with only brief in-person gatherings in between. In September 2021, City S launched a special campaign to eliminate religious activities in office buildings. Police suddenly arrived during a Sunday service at the venue, which the church had rented since 2015. This proved to be a significant learning experience and a test for the leadership, yet it also witnessed God's mercy toward the church. After vacating the venue, the church was unable to hold in-person gatherings throughout 2022, with the monthly rent exceeding 30,000 yuan. God unexpectedly spared the church a substantial expense. The third shock came in September 2024, as the church approached its 20th anniversary. Co-workers planned a church-wide retreat. Likely due to surveillance of the planning team's WeChat group, 7 co-workers were successively summoned for police questioning. These external pressures reinforced the church's resolve to continue as a house church. This incident highlights the ongoing tension between church and state, a persistent and inescapable issue for churches across China. Many members in X-Church had been top students since childhood. They went on to study overseas or graduated domestically, and most held stable jobs in government or at foreign enterprises. This experience of being summoned, interrogated, intimidated, documented, and threatened, as if they were criminals, inflicted profound psychological trauma. On the one hand, external pressures have made everyone acutely aware of fundamental differences in values between church and state, discouraging idealization of the latter. On the other hand, they have caused these socially and culturally concerned evangelicals to abandon the unrealistic optimism characteristic of 1930s liberals. At a deeper level, X-Church is learning the same spiritual lesson many predecessors faced after 1949. When called to walk the costly path of the cross, are we still willing to follow Christ?
Internal leadership crisis and governance models. External pressures have plunged the church into a predicament: no venue, no pastor, and no pastoral care. This has prompted the leadership team to reflect deeply on the essence of the church and its pastoral approach, especially on its own leadership. In the first phase, core leadership came from missionaries and the families hosting small groups. With extensive church experience, thriving families, and successful careers, they demonstrated strong leadership charisma both in image and in practice. During the second phase, Pastor C and his wife, along with Minister A, who joined later, gave co-workers confidence that full-time pastoral staff were shouldering the responsibilities. With these leaders departed, the congregation entered the third phase, anticipating a full-time pastor to assume responsibility for the church. However, despite interviewing multiple applicants, no suitable candidate was found. God seemed to intentionally dispel a misconception within the church: if only we had a full-time pastor. At a deeper level, this reflected a consumerist mentality, the belief that hiring a full-time pastor could deliver religious services, meet needs, and solve problems. This perspective was also linked to a para-church tilt and a program-driven model. In essence, the challenges for X-Church involved renewing cultural expectations of pastors, growing alongside ordinary pastors, and building a healthy leadership team. God reminded X-Church that it needed to grow beyond dependency on external resources and pastors and to embrace the calling of collective shepherding. This required reflecting on ecclesiology and church governance within their specific context. After dispelling the myth of the superpastor, God also prepared Pastor B to join the team and lead the exploration of new governance models. Pastor B proposed ordaining elders who would collaborate with the preacher and deacons in governing and shepherding the church, regardless of whether a full-time pastor is present. To date, implementing the church's elder system continues to face numerous challenges. The external environment has grown increasingly tense, and many members have emigrated overseas in the post-COVID-19 wave. Yet we continue to witness God's ongoing work. The testimony of one man is particularly encouraging, offering hope amid uncertainty. From childhood, he heard from his mother, a minister in a house church, about the need for workers in the church, planting a seed in his heart. He came to faith during his college years in the United States, and then received discipleship at a student fellowship while pursuing graduate studies in the United Kingdom. Upon arriving in X-Church, the seed sprouted and grew, leading him to serve this church. He chose to pursue seminary studies locally rather than overseas. Like the Israelites in the book of Judges, X-Church has learned and experienced war it had not known before. While facing external pressures and amidst internal leadership crises, we have witnessed God raising up leaders at every stage to demonstrate His provision and grace.
Part 4. Heritage and Quest. Origins and Heritage. Pastor John Stott emphasized the importance of the historical dimension of the church, identifying a weakness in the house church movement as a lack of historical perspective and continuity with the past. Chinese urban churches emerging in the 1990s underwent a process of spiritual adoption, becoming the spiritual children of those fundamentalist preachers who had endured imprisonment and trials in 1950 to 1970s, thereby inheriting the lineage of China's house churches. As an urban church that grew out of an overseas returnee fellowship years after the wave of spiritual adoption, X-Church seemed to lack direct historical roots in house churches. In recent years, as members learned about denominations, they frequently asked questions such as, which denomination does X-Church belong to? This year, a member who had moved to the United States texted in surprise after attending a Chinese church, "Why does the Sunday service here resemble X-Churches so much?" To trace X-Church's lineage, we need to start with this member's surprise and examine the evolution of Chinese churches in North America. Most North American Chinese churches evolved from student Bible study groups, with origins dating back to China's student revival movement and the establishment of student unions in the 1940s. These unions inspired many college students to pursue ministry, Following the 1950 political transition, a group of believers and pastors relocated to Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Southeast Asia, catalyzing the rise of campus ministries. This influence spread as students from Hong Kong and Taiwan pursued higher education in the United States, sparking the rise of Chinese Bible study groups in North America during the 1960s and 1970s. Beginning in the mid-1970s, these study groups began transitioning into formal Chinese churches, preparing to welcome mainland intellectuals who started arriving in the 1980s. From then on, Chinese churches began to influence international students and subsequently the returnee community. The lineage of X-Church can be traced back from the returnee wave to North American Chinese churches that evolved from Bible study groups, then to the student unions of the 1940s, and ultimately to the indigenous fundamentalist movement of the 1930s. Church history professor Kevin Yao noted that the first half of the 20th century was a period of formation and maturation for the Chinese church. During this time, the Chinese church integrated the faith passed down from 19th century missionaries from organizations like the China Inland Mission into its core identity, shaping the character, characteristics, and traditions of the contemporary Chinese church. Professor Yao further noted that this legacy has fundamentalist elements, a distinctive system that transcends denominations, regions, and nations. Together with the publication of the Chinese Union Version Bible, it created a shared heritage for the Chinese church. After 1949, this legacy split into two streams, one continuing through the house church movement to the present day, and another flowing overseas to shape Chinese churches worldwide. We can say then that X-Church represents a branch of the Chinese church that has returned to the mainland through overseas student ministries and Chinese churches. This signifies both continuity and distinct characteristics. While traditional Chinese house churches maintained a fundamentalist character from 1949 to 1989, shifting toward evangelicalism only in the 1990s, X-Church, like many emerging urban churches, has been evangelical from the start. Repeated challenges have also led X-Church to learn from and embrace the spiritual heritage of the mainland house church movement since 1949, while grappling with the age-old question of church-state relations that churches in China have always faced. In sum, X-Church is an urban house church that carries the legacy of both 21st-century Chinese Christianity and 20th fundamentalism, while embodying evangelical compassion and engagement.
Testimony and outlook. Over the years, the overseas returnees at X-Church have been the fruit of student ministries around the world, including Chinese student ministries in Japanese and Korean churches. This testifies to God's work in a globalized age, bringing the gospel from every place to every place. This church, started by returnees in City S, has itself become a channel of grace, proclaiming the gospel in homes and workplaces. The church members possess cross-cultural awareness, global perspectives, cultural sensitivity, and a heart to bear witness in their professional fields. Some have moved overseas again, becoming pillars in churches around the world. Others have answered calls to seminary and various ministries. Though returnees are no longer the church's primary demographic, their characteristics remain a blessing to the congregation. Drawing on their experiences as returnees, X-Church demonstrates cultural sensitivity and pastoral care, especially regarding traditional Chinese culture. Here, there is no patriarch. Leaders understand that they are individuals with limited abilities and responsibilities, so everyone participates and cares for one another. Some who have been hurt by traditional churches say about X-Church, "There's no factionalism or patriarchal control here. It feels open and warm." A cohort of young returnees at X-Church has grown to become the church's core leaders. They settled in City S, raised families, and together built this household of God, nurturing the next generation. Now, as the external environment seems poised for a new wave of trials and emigration, how should we anticipate God's work ahead? When the gospel once again confronts the age-old issues of church-state relations and Chinese culture, what must our generation hold fast to? What must we transform? As an emerging urban church, how do we face external pressures and the challenges of our city and the deeper cultural issues? How do we stand firm, continuing to proclaim the gospel and bear witness to Christ in this city? As a church that has received abundant resources and grace from God through missionaries, How do we turn toward God's kingdom and the mission field to become channels of grace? Recalling the founding of the China InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in 1945, Reverend Moses Yu Legong testified that he witnessed God preparing people for this era to partner with him, producing a new generation in the new age to continue his work, thus passing from generation to generation, wave upon wave, until Christ's return. Looking back at X Church's history, we clearly see this legacy. Looking ahead to X Church's future, we can still echo Reverend Yu's words. Who among us, as we prepare, truly knows what the great era will be? Human vision is limited, but God knows. We need only submit to His guidance and remain faithful. May this brief account of X Church's history proclaim the grace of the Lord, and may glory be to God the Father.
Thank you for listening to Gospel, Culture, Kingdom.
To subscribe, download past episodes, or access the PDF version of our magazine, please visit our website at cmiusca.org.